Now we got VLANs. VLAN allows the members to communicate. Members of two different VLAN, they cannot communicate unless you provide a router to route the traffic. Between VLAN is like between broadcast domain. Communicating between broadcast domain, you need a router. Only a router has got broadcast domain on each interface. If you take a router, every interface belongs to a broadcast domain. But if you take a switch, all interface belong to same broadcast domain. But by creating VLAN, you form this 4 as one VLAN, which means one broadcast domain, this 3 as another broadcast domain. So you create multiple broadcast domain, but do we have a layer 3 capability here? No. It's a layer 2 switch. It's a layer 2 switch. It's not layer 3. So moving packet from this boundary to this boundary, or moving packet from this VLAN to that VLAN, not possible. Not possible. But this router, if you take, every port belongs to a separate broadcast domain. No VLANs, nothing. By default, every port needs to be in different network on a router. If you try giving 10.0.0.1 and 10.0.0.2, will it accept? No, it won't accept. Why? 10 is identified as 10 broadcast domain. So when you assign 10.0.0.1 to this port, it is already a member of broadcast domain 10. You cannot have another broadcast domain with same ID 10. It won't accept. It will say this address already exists. This subnet is already exists in Ethernet 0. When you try configuring on Ethernet 1, even though the host address is not same, here it is 1 and here it is 2, it won't accept your configuration. Now, every port need to have a unique network, because every port has got a separate broadcast domain. This is 11.1 and 10.1, 10.0.0.1, 11.0.0.1. Communication between these two is possible because there is a router that handles the traffic, not switch. Routers are layer 3 device. We know they use the destination IP address to decide on the exit interface. When a packet arrives, they read layer 3 header. In layer 3 header, they look for destination IP. To that IP, they check the routing table, and if that destination is 10 network, then it pushes on this path. If the destination of the packet is 11 network, then it pushes the packet on this path, Ethernet 1 path. Routers route packet between different networks. Switches can't. Even if you have multiple broadcast domain, the traffics are local within the broadcast domain. All these 4 computers can communicate each other, no problem. Likewise, all these 3 can communicate each other, no problem. This story, what I have said so far, is a well-known story for you. But we are going to learn something unusual. What it is that within a VLAN, you want some computers to communicate, some computers not to communicate. See, within a VLAN, I told you all can communicate. all these 4 devices, because they are in same VLAN, let's say VLAN 10, they will be communicating. Without any problem, they will communicate. But there is some need for you. Members of same VLAN, let's say VLAN 10, you want these two to communicate, but this one not to communicate to anyone. Again, you want these two to communicate, and so on. You got a lot of policies like this. Members of same VLAN, but they are not supposed to communicate. You may think like, okay, better you put it in another VLAN. Put it in another VLAN, they are not going to talk. That's a good idea, but we want all these 5 computers to be seen as VLAN 10, to be seen as members of same broadcast domain at the same time. You do not want this to communicate to anyone. It needs to be separate. You do not want this to communicate to this. Communication should happen only between these two, and communication should happen only between these two. Now this is your requirement. To meet your need, this is the answer. Private VLAN. See, the word itself says privacy. Private. So there is a privacy between this group and this group. What is the other word for group? Can someone say another English word for group? In India also you got a lot of groups. What is the other word for group? Try answering this so that you will learn private VLAN and you will not forget. Any other word for group? The word community is what used here. This forms one community. So the members of this community won't talk to members of another community. There is another community here. These community members will talk. These community members will talk, but they don't talk each other. They don't talk. You may have more than one community if you want. You may have more than one community, but there is no need for more than one. Isolate. Sorry. Community mode. There is another mode called isolate mode. What does it mean? See, this port, let's say Ethernet 3, and this port Ethernet 6, Ethernet 7. So these ports, they are defined under isolate. What does it mean? They should not talk to each other. Ethernet 3 should not talk to Ethernet 6, Ethernet 6 should not talk to Ethernet 7. They are separate, isolated devices in the VLAN. See, they all belong to same VLAN. Understand? They all belong to same VLAN called 10. But they form different groups. Some say, I will not talk to anyone. The 6 and 7 won't talk to each other. Even though they belong to same VLAN 10, they won't talk because they belong to isolate mode. This Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2 talks very well. Why? Because they belong to one community. Ethernet 4 and 5 talks because they belong to another community. Will 4 talk to 1? Will Ethernet 4 talk to Ethernet 1? No, because they belong to different community. If this is your need, if this is your expectation, you need to go for private VLAN. Let us assume you open a new business. For your business, you need a network. So you bought a switch. The computers that are connected to these two ports belong to two cashiers in your business. And let's say it's a restaurant business. The people who are sitting in these two computers needs to communicate each other. Likewise, people who are sitting on these four computers needs to communicate because they belong to management. And the other port members should not communicate because they're all customers. This is a customer computer, this is a customer computer. You do not want one customer to get into the business of other customer and disturb them. So when customer sits on this blue computer, they will have some privacy. This customer cannot see this customer's job. So customer feels secure. Not anyone watching them. So what do? You take all these blue computers port and assign it to isolate mode. And you take all these management ports and put them in one community. And take these cache and put them in another community. So you got two communities and one isolate mode. All together, all these are under one VLAN. All these belong to one VLAN called 10. At the same time, they don't talk to each other because private VLAN is what makes them private. This is private from this. These are private for each other. They can't talk. Not only that, they cannot talk to any community members. They cannot talk. Not possible. Right. So private VLAN is isolation within a VLAN. Isolating is of three different modes. One, you have already seen, community mode. To identify, you give a number, let's say 101. You can call it a sub VLAN. This is the actual VLAN, the primary VLAN. This is the sub VLAN inside that primary VLAN. There is another community 102. Sub VLAN inside VLAN 10. See, when a traffic goes out let's say this is Ethernet 48. When traffic goes out, traffic will be seen as traffic coming from VLAN 10. When this computer sends any traffic, it won't go as VLAN 102, instead it will go out as 10. Why? This 101, this 102, they are all sub-VLANs. Sub-VLANs for VLAN 10. And here we say isolate VLAN, let's say 103. So members of 103 will never communicate. Will never communicate between them, within them, also between other communities, other members out of this isolate. They can't even communicate to management or cache. Will you allow a customer to get into cashier's computer? No way. That's why cashiers are put in one community. Customers cannot interfere into management also. That's why you have put in different community. Can customers see other customers' work? No. That's why you have put them in isolate mode. What is the third mode? Called Promiscuous mode. Promiscuous mode port. If 48 port number 48 is made as Promiscuous port, the Promiscuous mode port will have a VLAN called primary VLAN. So primary VLAN is 10. Promiscuous port are the port which are member of the primary VLAN. Promiscuous port are the one which can communicate to all sub VLAN members. So this traffic entering into 48 port number can go to cashier's team, can go to management team. If the destination is one of the member of the isolate team, it will go. Likewise, isolate can talk to Promiscuous. Isolate can talk to Promiscuous. Community can talk to Promiscuous. Promiscuous can be reached by anyone, and anyone can reach Promiscuous. Anyone can reach Promiscuous. Promiscuous can reach anyone. That's what Promiscuous port. So the isolate computer, let's say computer K and L, they cannot communicate, but K can communicate to Z here. Z can communicate to L, Z can communicate to K, Z can communicate to A, Z can communicate to H. Because Z is Promiscuous port, member of the primary VLAN. The primary VLAN is VLAN 10. The sub VLANs are 101, 100. It is your wish. You can take any VLAN as primary VLAN, and you can take any VLAN and assign it as sub VLANs. But when you use sub VLANs, try to use those VLAN numbers that are not used in any other switch. You may use it, but when the traffic goes out, it will go out as VLAN 10 only. But why? To avoid confusion, misunderstanding. See, many people don't know what is private VLAN. For them, this VLAN 102, which is under the primary VLAN, and the 102 VLAN on the other switch will be considered one, same. To avoid such confusions, it is recommended to have a VLAN which is not in use as a sub VLAN to avoid confusion. Right, end of the day, when it goes out on the Promiscuous port, it will go out as VLAN 10 only. Please ask me question. Private VLAN.
So, sir, this configuration for this will be under VLAN 10 that we need to configure?
No, don't worry about configuration. I'll take you there. Did you understand the story?
No.
Private
Yes, sir.
VLAN.
So basically, it is like making the best utilization of the VLANs instead of creating separate VLANs for each.
Okay. We are creating sub VLANs inside VLAN. Yes, please.
If anyone try to send any packet for VLAN outside of this, it will reach to all the
Yeah. If the destination is yeah. If someone is sending traffic from outside to
they cannot communicate.
correct. When someone is communicating from outside, they are coming via Promiscuous port, so they can reach anyone inside. Promiscuous port can talk to anyone, and anyone can talk to Promiscuous port.
Okay.
For example, if A and H wants to talk, if A and H needs to talk, they belong to different community. They cannot talk. If they want to talk, the traffic needs to go out from A. It needs to go to a Promiscuous port, and you need a router here. The router will take the traffic and route the traffic back to H. It is only by a router this communication is possible, and that it needs to go via Promiscuous port. Yes, question.
So one more thing. Actually, in the beginning, you were saying, in router, every port is individual broadcast domain. One port, if you are in 10.0.0.1/24, the another port we cannot assign the same city, but we can set that in the same subnet. 10.0.0.2 to another interface.
Wait.
Okay. In the first phone, usually 10.0.0.2 is custom. So that is the IP we assigned. In second port, 10.0.0.2/1. Both are same network. That we can assign, but you said we cannot assign something.
Okay, you are talking about the previous one. See, you are talking about this, right?
This one. Yes.
See, this is 10.0.0.1. If this is also 10.0.0.1, 10.0.0.2 /24, you see, when you say /24, what does it mean? It means that this belongs to 10.0.0.0 network, and this also belongs to 10.0.0.0 network. Only the host portion is different. The first 24 bit is same. So router will say this and this is same, cannot be configured. Same network cannot be configured on two interface. You need to have different network.
Okay. We cannot configure, but we can configure.
You cannot configure. You can configure to a computer, but not to a router's interface. See, if you will configure this, a router and then 10.1.0.1, 10.2.0.1/24, this is acceptable. Why? 10.24, 10.2.0, so this is the network, this is another network. Here it is 1 here it is 2. It's another network. But in here, it's the same network, 10.0.0.0, 10.0.0.0. Not possible. Same network,
Okay.
you can have only one interface, not more than one interface.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So let us go back to our topic, private VLAN. This private VLAN, you know why you have not heard before much? It is because it is Cisco proprietary. Available only on Cisco device, Cisco switches. That too, not on every Cisco switch, some special series. That's why it is not popular. This is a security feature. So only a security engineer will know this. That's why you did not come across this. Private VLAN. Private VLAN allows create sub VLANs. Okay. Now let us take an example to understand the configuration part. For our easy understanding, I'm going to keep one wire, one port here, and 2 port here, and three here. Enough to learn 3. And let's say the primary VLAN 10. The primary VLAN will be the VLAN of Promiscuous port. The person who designed this private VLAN should be very ugly guy. That's why he has given the name Promiscuous. Promiscuous port. Cultureless fellow. Only will give name like this. Promiscuous port. The port that can talk to anyone. So Promiscuous port will have the primary VLAN assigned, VLAN 10. And then let's say for community, which is a purple one, these two, we would like to give some number, let's say 101. And then isolate VLAN (102). Yep. So if you have these things very clearly defined, configuration is easy. First thing, you need to create VLAN 10, and we need to say it's a primary. And then we need to configure VLAN 101, and we need to say this is community. Create 102, say this is isolate. Exactly the same step I am going to do, only slight variation in commands. This is what we are going to do. First we will create primary VLAN, and then we will create 2 sub VLANs, and we will also define this VLAN is not an isolate VLAN, it's a community VLAN. So the word community it knows, and 102 isolate VLAN. After defining, we need to map VLAN 10 primary with 101 VLAN and 102. We are mapping this to this. This is the second step. We are saying these sub VLANs belong to this primary VLAN. All these things will be done under the VLAN mode, global configuration. After you finish doing this, you go to this interface and say this interface is a Promiscuous mode, belong to VLAN 10. And this one you will say these interfaces, you will go under these interfaces and say these interfaces belong to isolate mode whose VLAN number is 102 associated to VLAN number 10. This is the primary. This is the primary. This is the sub VLAN of it. All these configuration will go under these three interfaces. Likewise, you will go to this one and you will say this belongs to the host mode community. The VLAN number is 101, which is associated to 10 VLAN. These things what I have said now, you will put it in commands. That's all. We'll see how to configure this in the command line in our next class. If you have this knowledge, what we are doing, it's easy. You will not forget the commands. First thing, decide on the primary VLAN and the sub VLANs number, and then go and create them, and then go and map all the sub VLANs. This is under the VLAN mode only. Sub VLANs to the primary VLAN. See, I think it makes some meaning for you when I say this. You understand why we are doing this. Afterwards, you go to the Promiscuous port and say, hey, you belong to VLAN 10. This 10 already knows that I have rights to talk to these sub VLANs. I said Promiscuous can talk to everyone. It is because of this mapping here. And then we got a community group under which we say you belong to community 101, which is having primary VLAN as 10. Here we are saying you belong to isolate VLAN 102, which is mapped to community primary VLAN 10. So that community can talk to the primary VLAN, Promiscuous. Isolate can also talk to Promiscuous. I told you, isolate cannot talk between them, but it can talk to Promiscuous. Community can talk between them, between the community members. At the same time, they can also talk to Promiscuous. It's all because of this configuration. Is it easy? Are you comfortable with private VLAN? Any question? Fine. If